Hello, everyone. You're all very welcome to this webinar on managing ergonomics in the workplace, or how to achieve best practice in ergonomics management in the workplace. My name is Dimitri Porquet. I'm French. Don't hold that against me. I was born in the suburbs of Paris in a city called Trappes, but it wasn't a trap really because I'm here now anyways. And I spent a good bit of my childhood as well in China, in Shanghai, which was an amazing experience just to see different techniques, different cultures, different ways of doing things. A very good exercise just to broaden the spirit, broaden the mind. And it also helped to make it a tad more difficult for native English speakers to figure out that I actually sound French when I speak. But anyways, after that experience, I went back to the home country to France, and I studied in an engineering school called the UTBM in the east of France, the University of Technology of Belfort-Montbéliard, where I pretty much studied a degree, an engineering degree in designing products using a user-centered, human-centered approach, with a background of mechanical engineering, industrial design, eco-design, and a good bit of ergonomics as well. And in 2022, my degree led me to Ireland to carry out a work experience in LC Workplace Safety in Waterford, where I'm now really happy to work for a few years now. Now, if you're in the field of ergonomics in Ireland, or you may be a health and safety professional in the industry sector, you most probably have heard of Ita Leyden, who founded LC Workplace Safety. And if you don't know us, well, we provide consultancy and training in both health and safety and ergonomics. I am more involved in the ergonomics side of things, so that could range from office ergonomics, so DSC VDUs, if you ever heard of those. I also carry out ergonomic task-specific assessments, going to clients nationwide, assessing tasks on the shop floor, whatever it is. I also provide manual handling training, and where as possible, we try to make it as task-specific as possible, going to the real-life tasks that people will be doing, manual handling tasks people will be doing on the shop floor. A good bit of environmental ergonomics as well, noise monitoring, dosimetry monitoring, slip risk assessment as well. I also give training on the use of ergonomic tools, a bit of driving ergonomics assessment as well, and more globally, LC as a company just provides clients with support in ergonomics management. Now, if you follow the Irish Human Factors and Ergonomics Society and its events, you might know that there's not just one path leading to ergonomics. So I personally have an engineering background, and that's especially beneficial when a client, for example, wants to redesign a workstation or modify a tool to reduce ergonomics risks. And I may not have a health and safety background, but now serving clients nationwide for a few years now, I have a good understanding of the rules and regulations relating to health and safety in Ireland anyways. So now let's talk about ergonomics management. This is really important because good ergonomics practices reduces cost, absenteeism, injuries. It also improves safety, morale, employee engagement, and even productivity. By the end of this session, you will understand key principles of ergonomics management. This will take about 30 minutes, and I will facilitate this by illustrating each element of the framework. So let's start with the start, which is having an ergonomics program. So here what I'm going to talk about is the structural elements of your program, which means going from a starting point, an initial situation, and going to a target situation in a given time frame, probably. And your program is basically the path leading from the starting point to your target situation. And you could have maybe milestones along the way, like quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, talking progress to your senior management team. But one thing that I try to stress as much as possible is to have your program approved by the senior management team. The reason why I'm stressing this here is because your ergonomics program is just like any project. It requires resources, human resources, time resources, and most likely a budget as well. So having your senior management team on board will lead the program to its fruition. So that's my first point here. And once you have your program approved, what I generally recommend is to assemble your vendors. And what I mean here by assembling your vendors is to have a team of clearly defined roles and responsibilities with competent individuals. And that might not just be having the manual handling instructor carrying out the manual handling training, or the DSE assessor doing the DSE assessments. No, it could range far broader than just health and safety and ergonomics. It could be, for example, just have a task group of, I don't know, Tom, the production manager, and Johnny from line 2, to suggest improvements on how to solve this or that issue. And so having different profiles around the table just really helps, for example. So competent individuals and a good team of vendors, basically. My third point here about your structural elements of your program is to review and update your program. And what I mean here is that throughout your milestones meetings with senior management, you'll probably have to show evidence of ergonomics actions and improvements throughout clear KPIs on the ergonomic related issues. And ideally, your progress and your results will not only be communicated to senior management, but also to all of the workplace, everyone working there, in a very digest way, just to have as many people on board with your ergonomics program as possible. So in a nutshell here, showing progress and communicating on it throughout. So here I just gave you 3 points relating to the structure of your program. These were to involve the senior management team, to assemble your vendors, and to communicate on your progress. So now I'm getting to the thick of it, which is to figure out what's wrong with a starting point situation. And this is simply to identify your hazards. And there are loads of readily available tools that come from health and safety to use here that can be translated then to ergonomics. The first one that we generally talk about is your incident investigation, which is literally figuring out the root cause of an incident. And the message here is not just to exhaustively investigate an incident, but also to never conclude on human error as the root cause of the incident. Because if you do, you're essentially blaming and shaming people, and that's definitely not improving the workplace. It's rather affecting morale and employee engagement, and that's definitely not what you want to do. What you want to do is to go a bit deeper in investigating why the human erred, and then you may be able to take actions and carry out changes to the work design to prevent similar incidents happening in the future. And that's a reactive tool, which means that you have to wait for something to go wrong before you can investigate it. But there are tools that are proactive, which means you don't have to wait for something to go wrong. You can use it before something goes wrong. That's generally what we're looking for, right? And so very simply, it's a mouthful, but having a proactive hazard identification system is what we're talking about here. It's a mouthful. You probably have heard of it in different terms, simpler terms. It's called near miss, good saves, good catch, narrow escape, close call. They all mean the same thing. They're all the same system. And it's basically a way for employees to report hazards in their daily tasks instead of reporting incidents. And employees can report those hazards before something wrong happens. So that's really beneficial. But oftentimes we see such forms in companies and they look a bit like this. So I literally took took this near miss incident report here from the internet. And what we're looking at here is basically your type of situation that you're describing here. So you can read risky behavior, faulty equipment. You can read it's all related to health and safety. Obviously, it's a health and safety tool, but there's generally no mention of ergonomics in there. And it really doesn't take millions just to add a few tick boxes related to ergonomics, and that will allow us to flag ergonomic related hazards. Very simply, that would be to add a few tick boxes there. So what I generally suggest is to add the 4 ergonomics risk factors, which are excessive force, awkward posture, repetition, and duration of exposure. These are the 4 ergonomic risk factors. So this will allow us to flag those. And I generally like to add poor design as well in these tick boxes there, because sometimes in workplaces, well, oftentimes really, you see a switch next to an equipment, but what's the chance that the switch is actually going to turn on and shut off this equipment that is just next to it? Well, it's sometimes really not straightforward, and maybe that switch commands something that's on the other end of the shop floor, and it's actually oftentimes that this happens. And I'm currently getting trained in lotto and lockout tagout procedures, and that's one thing that we stress a lot, is that if there's no label on the switch, don't assume that it will turn off or shut off the equipment that is just next to, because that's not always the case, and generally not the case really. So yeah, going back to the near miss here, this provides the opportunity for the operators to raise and flag ergonomics hazards and to obtain key levers of improvement directly from the work experts, which are who are the operators on the line. So here, I just gave you 2 tools to identify hazards in a workplace, which were incident investigation and having a near miss system. Now that we've identified a few hazards in a workplace, what we need to do is to carry out risk assessments. Relevant ergonomic risk assessments. I'm stressing that here because coming from an engineering background and looking at health and safety risk assessment, general risk assessments, I find they always feel a bit subjective and rather loose for my engineer's rational brain, and so they're very practical ergonomics risk assessments tools that are very, very readily available to use for all to assess the risks of certain ergonomics risks that we're going to talk about here. And they're all very practical, very straightforward, and easy enough to use. And there's a lot that can be assessed in a workplace. For example, you could have your computer workstations, your repetitive tasks, your manual handling tasks. Maybe you have awkward postures as well involved. Maybe you have employees driving for work. Maybe you have a lot of noise in your shop floor. And we all have slip, trips, and falls in our workplaces, unfortunately. And all of these risks here have relevant tools to risk assess. For example, the HSA has a very detailed DSE VDU assessment form available on their website to assess computer workstations. The HSE UK has developed the Assessment of Repetitive Tasks, the ART tool for repetitive tasks, obviously. They also have developed the manual handling assessment charts to assess lifting, lowering, carrying, team lift operations, as well as the risk assessment for pushing and pulling, the RAP tool for pushing and pulling, obviously. And now if you want to assess awkward postures, coming from research this time, Sue Hignett from Loughborough University and Lynn McAtamney developed the Rapid Entire Body Assessment, the REBA tool that is used for awkward postures. And going back to the HSE UK, they also have developed the back injury risks for driving, the BIRD tool, as well as the noise exposure tool. And finally, to assess sleep risks, there's always straightforward methods like the pendulum, the British pendulum, and the slip alert. So as you see, to each risk, it's a very straightforward method or tool that is widely recognized as the best tool to use in those cases. Now, that being said, I always strongly recommend being trained and competent before using any of those tools, or to get competent consultants in to the job for you. So now that we've talked about risk assessments, what I want to talk about is what happens in workplaces when all your risk assessment, ergonomics risk assessment could be done. That's sometimes the case, and then you start walking on the factory floor and talking to the people on the shop floor, and you realize that actually things aren't exactly as you thought. So maybe the way that you assessed the task was maybe a bit too theoretical and maybe more based on the theory procedure, and it doesn't reflect at all what people are actually doing on the shop floor in real life. Or maybe something changed. Maybe an equipment was introduced, or maybe just the work design just completely changed, and the task itself completely changed as well. And you end up having a completely outdated risk assessment. So my second point here is to involve the ergonomics team in the change management procedure. This change management procedure is generally included in the ERP systems of companies. And sometimes when there is a significant change to the work design or an equipment purchase, well, risk assessment have to be reviewed and updated accordingly. And indeed, including the ergonomics team here, looking at maybe the potential purchase of an equipment is beneficial to indeed update those risk assessment and to review and maybe even guide the equipment purchase. Maybe one equipment is better for ergonomics than another. We see that all the time. And that's to avoid, again, the type of scenario where Dimitri from Ergonomics just walks on the shop floor in a warehouse and sees Tom from production. It's like, oh, that's a lovely new equipment that you have here. Your electric pallet truck there, fancy new equipment, very fancy. Like, yeah, we actually have that for 2 years now. It's like, oh, really? Okay. And so Dimitri starts realizing, okay, so I actually have a risk assessment that says that you're using a hand pallet truck, and that's actually a high risk from my memory there. And Tom from production says, no, not at all. We have this electric pallet truck. We got rid of our all of our hand pallet trucks. So no, your risk assessment are now completely outdated. And now Dimitri thinks about it like, oh, okay, well, yeah, with an electric pallet truck, it's most likely a lower risk now. So yeah, you end up with this kind of situation with an outdated kind of risk assessment, and yeah, indeed, just involving ergonomics in the change management procedure just avoids that whole situation there. So these were 2 points relating to risk assessments, which were to carry out relevant ergonomic risk assessments and to include ergonomics in the change management procedure. Now let's talk about raising awareness of ergonomics. Because what's the chance you meet someone in the street and they know what ergonomics is, or let alone human factors in ergonomics? Ergo what is what I generally get, but no, indeed, you have a good bit of the population that doesn't know what ergonomics is. Maybe they have heard about it through products, ergonomic products and things like that, but that's a very limited area of ergonomics. And it's more of a marketing tool more than anything at this point. But anyways, without getting sidetracked, indeed, the way to raise awareness on ergonomics is to have some ergonomics awareness introduction. And the best way to do that is to include that in the induction the induction process of new starters. When you have new employees getting to the company, they generally have to go through an induction process, which generally is quite long. It's generally a day of training in the training room, and just giving an introduction to ergonomics doesn't need to be heavy, but is a very good first awareness of ergonomics. Could be just, for example, to mention about the 4 risk factors of ergonomics. As I mentioned before, excessive force, awkward posture, repetition, and duration of exposure. And just mentioning those with site-specific examples, that could be as simple as computer workstations. Just saying that if Dimitri bends his back, leans forward at his laptop screen for 8 hours a day, you're combining basically awkward postures with duration of exposure. So Dimitri has a good chance of injuring his back here. And that would be the extent of it, for example. And this ergonomics awareness introduction works very well paired with manual handling training. And you can even make it, best practice would be to make it a task-specific practical manual handling. As I said before, for example, going on the shop floor, taking the induction new starters to the shop floor, carrying out a few practical lifts, real life lifts that they could be doing in their employment in the company. And you can trust me that they will be very happy to get out of the training room for a few minutes and doing actual real life practical things instead of just listening to a bunch of different managers talking to them about different very specific things, safety and whatever it is. And needless to remind here, the requirement for the competence of the individual giving the training. Obviously, that's one of the main important part here, and we're talking about ergonomics. And following the awareness training, a refresher awareness training could be provided as often as reasonably practicable. What we generally say is every 2 to 3 years, and for all employees, not just people on the shop floor, but also the managers as well. And that would be recommended, as often as reasonably practicable as well, and reviewed as well. The contents, best practice is also to review those contents on a yearly and bi-yearly basis, just to ensure reflection of current data, current practices. Because if you're not reviewing your presentation, you might have an example that's 10 years old in your presentation, and that greatly affects your credibility. So that's it. I just gave you a single point there, just about raising employees' awareness to ergonomics, which was generally to just carrying out regular awareness trainings on ergonomics. So at this point, we've talked about risk assessments, we've talked about trainings, incident investigations, near-miss systems, and all of these are loads of ways to know what's wrong with the initial starting situation. But what follows is the implementation of controls, and that's hopefully to solve what's wrong. So hopefully we can solve what's wrong. And some controls are fairly straightforward to identify, and some are rather complex. And having the right people around the table is the way to find the best, the most robust solutions for ergonomics. The ideal ergonomic solution is safe, is used by the operators, and it also improves productivity. And so who better than the experts on those fields to be around the table? If you want the control to be safe, the improvement to be safe, well, maybe involving someone from health and safety. If you want it to be used by operators, well, bring Johnny from line 2, for example. If you want to improve productivity, well, bring a process engineer or production manager, whatever it is. And having those different profiles around the table will create the ideal scenario for the best improvements possible. And ideally as well, your controls should be tracked all the way through completion. And having this formal system to track your open actions is best practice to ensure your progress. At LC, we have an in-house ergonomics management system, which is called EasyErgo, that does it pretty much this way. Very simply, you have your responsible person, your expected completion date, an outstanding risk linked to your open action, and your status of that open action. Is it completed? Is it pending? Whatever it is. So you can see in the first line here, the warehouse supervisor has completed their action, so that's perfect. That's all good. But as you can see, the warehouse manager here has still an action that's high risk and that's still pending. So we better get to it. So that's wise to track really your open actions to ensure progress. And controls should also be reviewed for effectiveness, and that can be done by reassessing the task after the implementation of control to make sure that you're actually reducing the risk. And that's one thing, but it's also very important to make sure that, for example, for engineering controls or mechanical aids that you're introducing to the work design, that they're used by all. Again, making sure that the operators, the people on the workshop floor, are actually using it. Maybe they were not trained. Maybe they don't understand what it's going to do or anything like that. Maybe it's just as simple as just a little chat explaining why this was introduced and everything, and that does it generally. But yeah, making sure that they're actually used those mechanical aids. Or in the case of your repetitive tasks and job rotation is generally the control for repetitive tasks. Well, they should be assessed to ensure that it actually reduces the risk. When we talk about task rotation, the way we get what we want to see is basically that it involves different motion patterns and muscle groups. The way we kind of analyze that is we use two art tools side by side. Looks something like that. Here, if you've never seen that, that's two art tools side by side with your risk factors. So left, right, left, right. On the left, you have task A. On the right, you have task B. And a good task rotation, a job rotation, is basically having where you have a red on one side. Well, having a green on the other side is what you want to see, so that it actually provides rest for this risk factor. And as you can see on the screen, that analysis here would be considered a good job rotation. Going from A to B to A to B to A to B would be considered a good rotation, as you have green where you have red and yellow in most cases. So yeah, there were 3 points, relating to the implementation of controls, which were to diversify your profiles around the table, to track your open actions, and to review your controls for effectiveness. So we've talked about showing progress, and numbers talk, as I said, and therefore recording your KPIs, your key performance indicators, is really important when you want to monitor your progress. The way we do it with EasyErgo, again, to go back to EasyErgo, is to have to show a few KPIs. So for example, as I said, EasyErgo does like this. You have your ergonomic tools, the number of ergonomic tools completed, so ergonomic risk assessment used. You have a breakdown as well of the risk. How many low risk do we have? How many high risk do we have? How many open actions do we have? And completed actions, here 0 is not great. We better get to completing those improvements, those actions. And yeah, a breakdown of the risks here. And on the other side, we also have different statistics relating to which ergonomic tool do we use. So you can see Mac and Wrap here. So we did a good bit of manual handling tasks. We assessed a good bit of manual handling tasks, a few risks as repetitive tasks here, and a few awkward postures as well. So these are all very good KPIs to show progress. For example, we can go back to it a few months later to see the comparison and how the progress went. And that could just not only be that could be not only those KPIs there, but could be also recording the percentage of tasks that you have assessed in the workplace, maybe the numbers of incidents, the number of injuries. Of course, analyzing these injuries, these ergonomic-related incidents, and absenteeism as well can prevent long-term issues, and they can also guide the ergonomics program by, for example, setting priorities. Very simply, if you are getting a lot of injuries on line 2, well, it most probably means that there's something wrong with line 2, and we might look at that in priority to see what is actually wrong and try to reduce those incidents and those injuries. So yeah, that's for monitoring. We've talked about communicating to all. We've talked about raising awareness, making sure that that employees know what we are doing. We've involved them in reporting hazards. We've involved them when suggesting controls and talking about improvements. And these are all things that are contributing to employee engagement to your ergonomics program. And just like any engagement relationship, it goes both ways, obviously. And the very minimum that you have to do to maintain this relationship is to provide feedback. Whenever you have an employee that is reporting hazard, that is raising a concern on their daily tasks, the bare minimum is just provide feedback on that. Like say, if Tom comes to me, it's like, yeah, there's this task, I've completed a form, here you go, here's the form, you can have a look at it. I think there might be an issue here. And just going back to that person, going back to Tom, saying, yeah, after 2 weeks, yeah, okay, I looked at it, I've done a risk assessment. Indeed, you're right. There's actually something wrong there. So we might get you back as well when we look for improvements there, because that's really what we're looking for. And just providing that feedback, that's a communication, really helps the employee engagement. So providing feedback is the bare minimum. What we also recommend doing, best practice, is to give credit in your communications, just to say that, yeah, thanks to Tom that raised this problem, that raised this issue here. Well, we've identified this issue, and we've done a risk assessment. We've involved Tom in the improvements. We've created a little task group, and we've come up with this solution. And since then, well, productivity just grew and improved greatly in that area, and that's all thanks to Tom. So fair play, Tom. Pat on the back, and let's give a clap for a round of applause to Tom. So yeah, offering your gratitude, and that greatly encourages other positive behaviors. And some companies even have points awarded, which can result in financial benefits. I've seen it around. If people, when people raise issues, report hazards, they can get awarded points that can result in financial benefits, which is also an incentive. But in my experience, the best incentive for employees to be engaged and be engaged in the program is to see improvement. If they're not seeing improvement, they will think, well, there's no reason why I would help the health safety team or the ergonomics team, because they're not helping me. When I'm raising a concern, it gets lost, it gets shelved, I don't know where it goes, and I'm not getting any feedback. So the best incentive is to actually to show them improvements in the workplace. And last thing is to own up to your mistakes. For example, when things don't go according to plan, when you thought you were going to improve that area, the line 2, for example, with a control, and actually it's increased the amount of injuries or anything like that, well, own up to your mistakes, communicate on it, doesn't have to be very negative. Could be just in a positive way with lesson learned. Like, look, we actually tried this control. We worked we worked on that hard, but it actually didn't work. But don't worry about it. We're still working on it, and we're fixing that mistake at the moment. This we could see that this definitely doesn't work. We're sorry about that, and we're working hard to solve this. And that is really beneficial, because if you're only talking about the good things but never talking about the bad things, well, this greatly affects your credibility, and it will greatly affect the employee engagement. Quick final words just about continuous improvement. I've just mentioned about lesson learned here, and that helps to improve your program. And it's very important to keep reviewing the program, keep raising the bar, improving it, setting higher targets. I see the program like a cycle, to be honest. To me, it's like it goes from hazard identification, risk assessments, implementation of control, communicating and raising awareness, and reviewing those controls, and maybe reviewing the contents of trainings or things like that. And that's all a cycle here that keeps repeating itself and improving. And I see it just like an ascending spiral, just getting improved by, as I said, employee engagement, and getting improved by maybe benchmarking with sister sites or external sites for big companies, or just to talk about to different professionals about what you're doing, and try to exchange on ergonomics related issues. That can also be very beneficial to your program. But also, what I would like to mention here as well is to provide opportunities to your vendors to upscale, to blossom, to level up, because Iron Man gets a new suit, and guess what? Mario eats a mushroom. Well, ergonomists, they're the same. They get new experiences, new trainings, new certifications, new responsibilities, and they grow. And all of that positive improvements and growth just get fed back to the ergonomics management program. And that's what we want to see, and that's how you improve that whole program. So in a nutshell, having an ergonomics program goes from identifying hazards to reviewing improvements for effectiveness, and it's all nurtured by employee engagement, by continuous improvement, by upskilling your vendors. And this is pretty much how to achieve best practice in managing ergonomics in a workplace. And yeah, that's pretty much how you achieve best practice. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment or query. I'm always available if you want to contact me there. These are my details. Thank you again for attending. Thank you for your time.